our third session for the day, which focuses on disruptions in higher education and India's opportunities in 2020 and beyond. Our previous panel was an insightful discussion on the role of government in reforming education. Having looked at education in general, it is now time to initiate dialogue on how the pandemic has impacted higher education in particular and what is the way forward. As colleges put academics on hold and reroute to digital learning, many are taking this time to reflect, revise, and reinvent curriculum and models of teaching. The past few months have functioned as trial and error as universities try to incorporate best practices in online teaching. However, the inequitable access of online resources has left many of our government school students stranded and uncertain. It remains to see how the higher education fraternity will respond to these changes and advance towards the future. So join us as we explore the disruptions in higher education and what opportunities lie ahead. To moderate this discussion, we have Mr. Siddharth Chaturvedi, Executive Vice President of the AISECT Group. He handles the strategy and operation for the group's various activities, which is India's leading social enterprise working in areas of higher education with 5 universities pan-India. He has been instrumental in strengthening the group's various initiatives in association with the Government of India. Absolute pleasure to have you here, Mr. Chaturvedi. Our first panelist for the discussion is Dr. Vishal Talwar, Dean of BML Munjal University. Prior to joining BMU, he was the head of campus Mumbai and assistant dean for the SP Jain School of Global Management. With research and consulting interests in customer portfolios, marketing resource allocation, and consumer ethics, he has published in several leading journals. Dr. Talwar, delighted to have you with us. Our second panelist for this afternoon is Mr. Atul Khosla, founder and pro-vice chancellor of Shulini University, a leading research-centric private university. At Shulini, Mr. Khosla drives new initiatives such as initiating partnerships with programs and transforming a traditional system to new methodologies of pedagogy. Mr. Khosla, thank you for joining us today. Next, I would like to introduce Dr. Kanu Priya, Professor and Associate Dean of the School of Law at Ansal University. Dr. Kanu is a PhD in constitutional law with over 14 years of blended experience in legal practice and academics. With over 20 articles in national and international peer-reviewed journals, her participation in seminars and conferences has always been appreciated. Dr. Kanu, pleasure to have you here with us. And finally, I would like to introduce Mr. Mohamed Chukral, founder and managing partner for Vivtera and founder and trustee of Plaksha University. An accomplished business leader with over 2 decades of experience, he has been backed by Warburg Pincus for his new venture. He was executive officer and business leader at Genpact and was leading the organization's largest vertical globally. Mr. Chukral, thank you for being here with us. Before we begin, just a quick set of guidelines about our sessions. Since we're using a virtual platform, you may likely experience a time lag. The session recording will be shared after the summit is over. In case there are any questions, we request the attendees to please share them in the Q&A function. And since each session is a separate Zoom link, if you get logged out, please head to the auditorium section. I would also like to remind our panelists that this session will end at 12:35 p.m. There will be a buzzer 5 minutes before the end time. Mr. Chaturvedi, over to you now.
Thank you, Yamini, and welcome all the panelists and the attendees to the first thematic session of this conference, which is on higher education. And today we are here to discuss the disruptions and opportunities in the Indian higher education system, which is 1,000 universities, 40,000 colleges, and 10,000 independent institutions, and 3.7 crore learners strong. So it's a pretty complex, pretty diverse, and pretty large ecosystem. And having said that, we are also having this discussion at a time when we probably have a rare opportunity to re-envision, reimagine, and take the entire higher education ecosystem in a new light in the wake of the COVID crisis. So finally, we are also having this discussion at a time when the long-term aspect of the COVID crisis has sunk in for most of us, and there is a slightly little more clarity on what to expect in the coming few months as far as the higher education sector is concerned. So thank you so much for letting me have this opportunity, and I have an illustrious panel to moderate. It's a privilege. Let me begin straight away, and I will come to Dr. Vishal Talwar for his first comments. So Dr. Vishal, we have seen that in the past few months, there have been a lot of pivots and experimentation when the pandemic hit all of us. Some of those responses were ad hoc, some of those responses were very planned. So I would like to get your comments on what has been the one or two biggest learnings from all the experimentation you did in your institution for the last 3 or 4 months, and how's your readiness for the coming academic year, which will be starting in let's say next 2 or 3 months. And finally, what do you see as the enrollment or the admissions trend across the sector for the higher education institutions? Dr. Vishal.
Well, thank you very much, Siddharth, and everybody else. I think one of the biggest learning, firstly, that I would like to mention is that the change agent, which has created so much of a transition and transformation within the higher education sector, has been technically a virus. And a system that was predominantly designed for about 200 to 300 years, based around this whole idea of being able to provide for India, of course, in a positive way, a large middle class, a large working class, certain levels of employment, has now obviously had to look at a lot of different things, spurred by the pandemic, but more importantly, spurred by, in the last 7-8 years, the technological changes that we have witnessed. So, whether that be about, the exponential technologies, how do we look at it? So essentially, these last 3-4 years has been a major learning for us as university, as a progressive university. I'm sure many other universities out there who sometime in March had to look at what they should be doing next, whether they should be looking at flexible working, whether they should be looking at a blended approach to learning as a mechanism of being able to provide 24/7 immersion. I think the questions and the debates and a lot of the decisions had to be speeded up, essentially, because of the pandemic. So in a way, the few of the things that we are learning and of course have progressed quite a bit on is our ability to create more immersion, more engagement with the student. What you have to remember is that whether it's the pandemic or whether it's the last 7-8 years of rising expectations, whether it is demand for more agile university setups, whether it is expectations from an employment standpoint, whether it's the expectations of the curriculum, the relevance of the curriculum, a lot of these things around lifelong learning, a lot of these things around the fact that what I'm being able to teach, the spectrum of courses that I'm teaching right now or delivering at the moment, what's their relevance, how does it actually make sense for us? A lot of these conversations have actually re-energized the higher education environment for the good, in my opinion. And of course, as far as the other aspects are concerned, whether it is about the admission readiness, yes, if I look at it from a standpoint, I'm sure most universities are looking at 2 plans at the moment. Most universities, higher education institutions are looking at this whole idea of how do you incorporate a lot of the learning in the online medium, how we move towards more constructivist approaches to learning, how do we incorporate that even after students are actually back into the campus, right? So I think there are 2 issues here. One is, when will the students come back to campus? Of course, there has to be some green signals out there from the regulatory environment about the physical presence of the students in the classroom. So essentially, this online approach will definitely enrich the whole student experience going forward. But at the same time, as far as the readiness is concerned, of course, there's readiness from both points of view. One, readiness for being able to create initially an online learning environment, an online teaching environment, let's say for courses such as the postgrad courses, maybe, for example, the MBA, which has a certain curriculum, which has got a smaller window to be able to finish a lot of the things that they actually do in terms of course and the curriculum. And I would imagine a lot of these would start online, let's say July, August onwards, even before the physical presence in the classroom happens. So, of course, universities will work on 2 plans. One is elongated periods of online presence, online learning. The other is, of course, the SOPs, the standard operating procedures, once students come into campus, whenever the green signal happens. As far as the admissions are concerned, yes, there is, whether it be the undergrad, whether it be the postgrad, depending on the nature of the course, we have seen certain levels of changes or certain levels of demand increase and maybe demand decrease as well. So if you look at, traditionally, if I look at the, the economic environment right now, if I look at management courses for that matter, I think sometimes what I would call as depressed economic conditions leads to an increase in demand for business-related courses. And of course, we have seen that in India as well. Of course, at the same time, when you look around and when you look at the kind of data that's coming out, yes, some data that is being reported is around certain reduction in demand for certain kinds of courses, right? So sometimes people classify them as professional courses or not non-professional courses. So of course, there'll be a variation in the demand. Of course, we also see a lot of impetus and focus on local demand. So a lot of the parents who, especially at the undergrad level, a lot of them who are making the decisions along with the student, in focus, may want to look at local alternatives, regional alternatives, and may not necessarily want to travel too far, right? So we see that kind of environment currently right now.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. I think we touched upon quite a few themes which are, playing out in the higher education system today. So let me turn to Mr. Atul Khosla now. And Mr. Khosla, we heard technology, blended approach, online being the disruption in Dr. Vishal's initial comments. So we would definitely like to ask you as to what has your experience been, what's the readiness, and more than that, specifically talking about technology as a disruption. So this is not a new dialogue. It has been there pre-COVID as well. But this time, what's your sense? I mean, is it again overhyped, and when the dust settles, we will come back to our original ways, or is it going to make a permanent dent this time? And second, what about the increase in expenditure? So a technological infrastructure upgrade does cost quite a bit of money in terms of making those kind of shifts. So what's your sense on managing that kind of additional expenditure also, and what's the necessity for making that transition to the online medium? Mr. Khosla. So please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Siddharth. Am I audible to you?
Yes.
Wonderful. So thank you, and truly appreciate the opportunity to speak in this wonderful panel. So many of your friends, and I've always been a little blunt about my views, and I'll try to be a little outside the box in my thoughts again over here. I think the first fundamental premise I'd like to leave over here is that higher ed, the way we see today, was designed for the industrial world. So the industrial world of the 15th, 16th century is how we designed our universities, which I call big fat universities. So we designed universities for that, and no one wanted to change. And we didn't want to change because higher education by definition was highly regulated. We know for a fact that any industry that's highly regulated is resistant to change, and that's what was happening in higher ed. Also, we've got some very, very large universities around with a huge amount of capital which is pumped in. Let's take the example of Harvard, huge endowments. Or Mohit is building a huge university with probably a corpus of 1,000 crores. There's a resistance to change for disruptors. Good news, COVID has happened, and suddenly the world has changed. And we will now go into the digital age of learning. And I'm very excited about it because fundamentally the way universities and higher educational institutions should be in this new world is now going to happen. So I'm going to talk about 5-6 things as learnings that I have, which I think will be relevant to all the educators over here, and then I'll also answer some questions. I'll sort of run over them, Siddharth, so please bear with me. So my first thought is, for all of you, just think outside the box. Online learning is not about just taking offline learning and putting a wrapper of technology and delivering. It's really about just changing the way you make learning happen, whether it's pedagogy, whether it's instruction design, whether it's the type of learning you want your students to have. I'll give you a small example over here. You cannot do 60 minutes of lectures in online anymore. You have to start thinking about a 20-minute lecture. Your pedagogy cannot be synchronous. It has to move towards asynchronous. Lots of project work. It's a big topic, but rethink and just break the box, I will say, not just think outside the box. The second thing I would like to say is that have a bipolar view of the world. Honestly, however much experts we are, no one knows the final answer. So have a long-term view about where you think the strategy should be, and a short-term view, and start working around the short term while keeping a long-term vision in mind. For example, I do not think there should be 4-year courses anymore, but that's my long-term view. I don't know when that's going to happen, but in the short term, I need to make some changes to make sure that technology is implemented, etc., etc., etc. That's my second thought. My third thought is that, it's also about the right technology. So invest in the right technology. It's not about Zoom. Your LMS, your collaboration tool, your assessment tools, all need to be integrated. You have the opportunity of using artificial intelligence. You have the opportunity of using analytics to make sure that learning happens. It's just like Google Maps. You can actually track now the performance of every student individually and have an individual track of learning for them to make sure that their skills and competences are built. So find the right technology. It's not available. We have some great tools, and if you want help and support from Shalini, delighted to give that help to all of you. The third, your students and teachers are not ready right now. Invest in their training. Invest even in student training, how to absorb online learning. Your teachers really have to go through lots and lots of faculty development programs. For example, I'm doing something very interesting. I'm having every teacher go through theater learning. They need to learn how to speak to a camera, for example. It's very different. There used to be a word called in theater called the fourth wall. I don't know how many of you are there into theater. The theater fourth wall basically said that forget about the audience when you deliver theater. And that's true now in this world because we don't know who's listening and who's not listening. But you can use technology, as I was telling Mohit the other day, to understand what is the absorption of learning that's happening. Fifth, keep experimenting. Like I said, we don't know the right answer. So keep on building new things, keep on building new thoughts. And my last thought is going to be, which is very, very important. The world is not about knowledge. Knowledge is available at the press of a button. You can get it through edX, you can get it through Coursera, you can get it through Google, whichever source you want. It's about the me skills and the we skills, which is basically how do I make people leaders? How do I make people learn? How do I make them communicate better? How do I make my students collaborate better? Make them team players? And that is a question which I'm struggling with. How do I build communities in the virtual world? So I will request you to start thinking about that. How do you do student-to-student engagement in this new world of online learning? And building those communities, I think, is going to be very, very important as we go about doing it. There's going to be a consolidation, Siddharth, in this world. So you will have to decide, teachers, academicians, promoters of universities, do you want to be knowledge consumers or do you want to be knowledge creators? Everyone will not be a knowledge creator. There will be platforms that will come up who will develop knowledge. So your question to you is going to be which part of the spectrum you want to play. As teachers, I will give one analogy which I always speak about, Siddharth. If you remember Mahabharata, there was what was the Dronacharya? There was Dronacharya, and we only remember Dronacharya, but there were 100,000 gurus, I'm told, supporting Dronacharya to succeed. Now you have to decide as a teacher whether you want to be a Dronacharya or you want to be those flunkies who are supporting Dronacharya, which means you as teachers have to sizably upgrade your skills. How do you teach? Experiment. So those are my thoughts about what's going to happen. In terms of investments, I think very sizable investments need to go in. Institutions need to sizably rethink the infrastructure. I think the investments in technology will have to be way larger. I'll give you a small example over here. At Shalini, we are building 50 studios to deliver lectures because the quality of delivery is actually very, very critical, which means you have to give high bandwidth on fiber to your faculty. You need to have all the IT infrastructure for them to deliver the lectures better. So big costs are happening. So it's actually more expensive to deliver online than it is to deliver offline. So scale will be important. So there'll be consolidation. I think the biggies will become bigger. So I think that's individually a strategy that each one of us will have to have. How do we invest in? So if your scale is today 4,000 students, 5,000, think about 10,000 because your investments are going up. I think there's going to be pressure on costs also. I still don't get it why an Indian student should pay 10 lakh rupees or 8 lakh rupees or 5 lakh rupees per year. When Haldiram can deliver a 10 rupee packet of chips consistently with the same quality or better quality over 10 years, why should education be so expensive? Just because we like some great Husseins on our, at the back of my, board. So I think teaching will get cheap. I think it has to be delivered at 10, 15, 20,000 rupees a year. We will have to build models to make that happen.
Right.
So there will be commoditization, standardization that happens. I'm very excited about it, Siddharth. Those are my last points.
No, thank you so much. I think that's a wonderful portrayal of things to come, and it was also laced with infectious optimism. I think all of us can take that back as definitely one of the lasting feelings. So let me turn to Dr. Kanupriya at this moment. And, apart from your learnings and plan for sure, which I would request you to now, very, put it very briefly, I would like you to touch on aspects. One, we have seen a lot of back and forth happening on exams and online exams, and the regulator has been of one view. The state governments also have been having their own views, and the issue of general promotion, whether it's good, whether it's not, that also has been debated upon. So I would like to get your view on exams and online exams and general promotion. And second, including one of the questions which has been thrown in the Q&A panel, what do you think of the divide which gets created due to more and more leverage of technology? And we've seen recently that, the digital divide has not gone, and it's very much around us. In the last 3 months, we have probably learned about it much more. So on digital divide and on online exams specifically, and any other learnings. So very briefly from you, Dr. Kanupriya.
Thank you so much, Siddharth. A very good morning to all the panelists as well as all the attendees. So I think we'll start the debate with a single quote that India is an example of unity in diversity. And when we talk about diversity is at all ends. So whether we start from reservation, which is the core of the social structure in India, or whether we talk about economy, again there is a divide between rich, poor, below poverty line and all that. And also when we talk about education, so of around 1,000 universities, which we are about to reach the target, currently there's 967, I believe, as per the data released by UGC in February 2020. So we are about to reach 1,000 universities in India, but what is the status? Are they actually in parity? No, there is a lot of disparity between the universities, whether the infrastructure is considered, and that has actually revealed during this pandemic, because when the government, they were actually taking the decision on how to conduct the exams, whether or not we can go ahead without conducting the exams. So I think the government has already, the UGC has already given a go-ahead with regard to all the, all the semesters of the higher education degrees. But the question is whether we are justified in promote the final year students, because ultimately they have to land into profession. So the question came into the authorities, and the authorities initially decided, okay, fine, we can go ahead with the exams and they can be evaluated on the basis of internal assessment. Employers, the pressure which was imposed upon by the employers, no, we need to have your CGPA, and of course we need to know your specializations which you did in the final year and how far you have been able to acquire the skills. That was a big question mark. Again, UGC reverted back to the original, no, we have to conduct the exams, so let the exams be postponed. But how far do we go like this? How far do we go along with this divide? Certainly the responsibility greatly lies on the shoulders of the government. They need to devise a system. They need to provide certain resources to those universities who do not have access to technology. So if we talk about 1,000 universities, out of 1,000 universities, approximately, I would say 40% universities will not have access to technology. Even if the universities have access to technology, whether all the students, they can have access to technology, that is the next step. So keeping all that things in mind, we have to devise ways and means to start our processes to make it available to each and every student pan-India. So that is the biggest challenge that we are facing right now. At primary level, this situations have really sorted out because there is a lot of vigor in the educational professionals, and They are going to the rural areas. They are posting channels on the TV. So TV has become, any electronic instrument has become a medium of knowledge and communication these days. So let's use all those technologies. We don't think that every student who is studying is not having access to technology. In one way or the other, when it comes to playing games or other things, every person have an access to playing games on devices. But when it comes to education, why do we lag behind? So with that spirit, we have to move ahead and we have to make it available. We have to devise ways and means. For example, if I talk about my own university, Ansel University, wherein we started evaluating the students online. So we were very lucky enough to have access to the best digital platform wherein the learning was happening initially only. So we started with the digital platform in 2019 itself, where all the courses were available to the students online itself. The complete material and everything. Each and every student was already mapped in the software. So the issue came that during this lockdown, specifically the students who were in Jammu and Kashmir, where they don't have access to technology. So that was the major area of concern, how to evaluate those students. So we started various other ways and means, maybe emails, maybe WhatsApp, maybe telling them to have access to technology as and when they can have. So the core key that we need is flexibility in the system. As long as we are flexible and we are not bound by the rules and regulations of the government, then we can leverage education and we can leverage the skill making power. Right. So the biggest advantage that we took during this lockdown was enhance the research potential of the students. Fine, right. You cannot go on with the practicals, but you can always go on with the research. Maximum publications. We organized a seminar where each and every student had presented a paper. So right. That was the best way out to take advantage of this lockdown situation where constraints, physical constraints were there, but we should not be bound by the mental constraints. We should right. leverage our mental ability so that we can grab the best out of our potential.
Right.
So this is what I would like to say, Siddharth.
Right. No, thank you. I'm sure the entire higher education ecosystem would be, if documented well, post this crisis, we would be coming across a lot of interesting pivots and examples which have been tried out by various education leaders. Now I come to Mr. Mohamed Chukral. Personally, sir, I'm very excited, interacting with you, because the story of Plaksha University is one bright ray of hope, and I dare say it might also be a major disruption if played out well, and we're all waiting for the campus to open in August 2021. So when 45 business leaders come together and they pool in more than 2,000 crores of corpus to bridge the industry-academia divide, I think the Indian education system has a lot to celebrate when we hear of that. So my question to you would be, with the niche tech-focused university, how do you see the role of Plaksha now in the current crisis? And also, can you touch upon the buzzwords of AI and ML and data science? And we've been hearing a lot about them. What is the correct way to approach these skills so that we get the industry-ready workforce of tomorrow? Mr. Mohit.
Siddharth, thanks a lot. If you guys all can hear me, thank you for having this panel and with such a illustrious group. Look, I'm not an educationist. Education has been a passion for some of us. The future skills has been a passion for some of us. And the whole concept and thinking of Plaksha started with a few of us, five of us, about 4 years ago. And, now this dream is actually becoming a reality. And for us, Plaksha is a mission. It's a collective philanthropy effort by just not 45 of us, but 80 of us now. And globally across the world, where we believe that bringing in people around the world with really very, very intelligent minds in helping build this university of the future. We truly believe that, Plaksha is going to be the cutting edge university east of this world. We would be a university, we believe, which can make a difference, can make an impact over the next decade or next 50 to 100 years. Right? So our university is going to start actually in fall of 2021. We already run a bunch of programs. But look, Plaksha is all about solving for India's grand challenges. One of the foundations and visions of how we thought about this was that how are we going to solve for India's grand challenges and global challenges that are facing us, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in clean energy, whether it's in mobility, whether it's in digital agriculture. And I think these are the fundamental horizontal, I would call it the vertical layers of where we want to really go and make an impact. And how do you build and teach and make learning more all about, Atul talked a little bit about that. It is not about the way a lot of us have learned is rote learning, right? How do you make it tinkering? How do you make it real? How do you make it what is relevant, going to be relevant for the future? How do you be more agile? How do you really change the way the whole education is imparted, right? I mean, we are looking at programs around computer science and artificial intelligence, robotics and systems, cyber physical systems, biological systems engineering, data science and business economics, right? So while the pivot is a lot around technology, but the use case, I go back to my learnings from in a services technology world, is for in these industries and these verticals. So how do you build the leaders and engineers for tomorrow, which will make an impact across some of the areas that I talked about? And our mission is to build and build leaders for tomorrow. Leadership is not about just making them learn about technology. Leadership is not about making them do engineering courses. Leadership is all about tinkering, practical, capstone, and making them ready for the future world, right? And I think the whole thinking is around bringing in deep tech and having, if we will be feeling proud, 10, 15, 20 years from now, that we build the world's biggest startups, right? We build the world's biggest companies out of India. And I think that's where our whole goal and mission is. And our mission is to take this, to take the education and have students come from a diverse background in India and come and study at Plaksha in Mohali. That's where the campus is coming up. You folks can go to our website on plaksha.org and read more about that. But clearly that's our view. And I think the uniqueness of Plaksha is just not about pure play technology. It is about bringing in the elements of how are you solving India's grand challenges. Right. How are you solving for, like I said, clean energy, automation, robotics, and you really bringing some of that to bear. And we believe that that is the future. That is where the world will hang the hat on. COVID has actually made us rethink our blueprint. So in the last 6 months, we've been really working hard as a team and with our academic council, which is in the US and in India and in Asia, to really redefine education. We believe we are a green field. We can rewrite the way education is imparted. So obviously there's a massive build up on how do you build the technology backbone, both from a ERP perspective, because how do you layer the learning management system? How do you layer the collaborative tools? How do you layer collaborative learning? How do you layer collaborative relationships? So I think that's how we're trying to build the university as we go forward. And the pivot is saying when kids come out of school, of the university, they are employable, they have the jobs, because today when people come out of universities, companies retrain them to make them more efficient in what they have to do. So I'll pause.
Okay. Right, thank you. I think Pooja, Yamini, that was a buzzer from your side, is it?
Yes, that was Mr. Siddharth.
Oh, I thought we just got started. That's a shame. So, but nonetheless, let me get, okay, so we are towards the end of the discussion, I think. But let me get one final comment from all of you on some of the other themes which are playing out today. And I'll request you to just restrict your answer to 1 or 2 lines. Mr. Atul, first of all, over to you. What happens to research, impact on research, and how do you think research would be impacted? Just one comment from your side, 1 or 2 lines on research. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, as a research-centric university, Siddharth, I can tell you that research has actually gone up dramatically. Online actually gives more time to faculty to spend time on research. So we are actually going full-flown research. Our number of patents or research papers has dramatically gone up. Commercialization has gone up. So I don't see it as a challenge because we are functioning fully as a university. All my faculty is coming right now on campus. All the research scholars are on campus. Only the UG and master's students are not there. So guys, don't worry about research. It can be done. And by the way, lots of research can also happen using analytics and transferring data. One last point on research very quickly. Collaboration is dramatically gone up between institutions, and that leads to superior research. So I am all for this great wave of change that's happening.
Right. Dr. Vishal, can I come to you and your views on the 40% or the suggested 40% limit from the regulation side of courses which can be done online? Your views on that?
So I think this has been debated a bit. I would assume, I'm not sure, I would assume the 40, earlier I would, there are limits to how much online learning you can actually do. Now it's, maybe been increased to 40%. But I think instead of talking in terms of percentages, or whether it's 10%, 20%, 30%, or 40%, we should talk in terms of the learning piece. How do we fulfill the learning outcomes? How do we fulfill the learning requirements? So if it requires us to actually keep pushing up in terms of the percentage, if you want to quantify in terms of percentage, that's perfectly fine. But I would assume one thing that must have been going on in the regulatory mind was to take some kind of a runway for a lot of non-physical presence in the universities, and that's why you may have kind of looked at upping the percentage. But I think fundamentally we need to go back to the drawing board to understand, it's not about percentages, it's about the ability to create a blended learning environment that fulfills a lot of learning, that is attaining a lot of employability characteristics, that's bringing in the flexibility, that's bringing in interdisciplinary learning. I think that should be fundamental instead of maybe looking at it from a percentage standpoint. That's what I believe.
Right. Dr. Kanupriya, your thoughts on the online universities and the current, the recent guidelines we have got on the 100 or 100 odd universities based on some criteria, which would be online universities. Your thoughts on that?
See, UGC has already permitted the universities to go ahead with online degrees. So there are few universities who have already started up with this program. Specifically, if we talk about General Global, they have already started an LLM, Masters in Law program, which is purely online. So, but again, we have to think that whether we can completely replace the physical education with online education, that's a big question mark. So, to my mind, blended learning should be the best approach. So, completely going online should not be the correct thought process. So, we can substitute a part of it, but completely going online is totally out of the box, because if we say that, okay, fine, we have, a judiciary in India and we can file the cases online, whether everything can be done online. So I really doubted how the evidences are to be produced, how the witnesses are to be heard. So again, the question remains whether proper opportunity is given to each and every person to represent his case. I don't think so. So we cannot replace it altogether. Certainly, it should be a blended version, and whatever we can do online, we should do online. But certainly it cannot replace altogether the physical learning.
Okay. And Mr. Mohit, for you, specifically from the engineering domain, do you think we are moving towards a specialized age where, just plain simple BTech in CS and IT would disappear in few years, and we would have specialized BTech degrees in AI and cybersecurity and so on only in play? What's your thought on that?
I think, Siddharth, we're already moving towards that, right? I mean, the AICT, etc., don't have any issues around that, how you define them, as long as they are 3 years or 4 year programs, right? And like I said, we are looking at a computer science and AI program, right? We're looking at robotics and connected systems program, right? These are all, very different than the regular BTech and others that are out there, right? So really, these are really pivoting very sharply on certain areas, and when you look at all these new areas, how do you really use them in different parts of like I said, our whole grand challenges issues, or the challenges that the world faces today, and applicability of the learning is very, very going to be important, right? So I think it's already happening, and I think you'll hear more about it from us as we open the university next year, because it's not going to be just like a regular BTech, chemical engineering or mechanical engineering. It's going to be biotechnology, it's going to be computer science and biology, it could be computer science and AI, economics and math, and to creating data science. So I think we'll have to play around with a lot of these things to drive the real impact for students who wanting to learn in the future.
Right. So I think we can already see Pooja on the screen. So thank you so much, panelists. This has got to be one of the webinars which has got the most power-packed insights in a short 35 to 40-minute discussion, which I have at least had in last 4 months or so, and during the spate of webinars which has flooded all of us from all around. So thank you so much. I'm definitely going back with a lot of insights, a lot of optimism, a lot of positivity, and a few action items to be implemented back at our institutions. So I'm sure all of us who are there in the audience also would have taken a lot of learnings from this discussion, a very enriching discussion. And thank you, CSR Box, for putting together such a powerful and a very experienced panel for us to moderate and listen to. Over to you, Pooja.
Thank you so much for such a thought-provoking and wonderful session. Agreeing to you, Mr. Siddharth, it has hardly been a few hours into the summit and we already have such motivating and inspiring conversations. As pointed out by the panelists, the future of learning is not just to wrap it up in the garb of technology alone. Learning has to be asynchronous, holistic, agile, and relevant. It is also important to scale up the investment in faculty development, infrastructure, accessibility, quality of content, delivery, etc., and to use novel and blended approaches to ensure that the model is apt and affordable, and the learning is absorbed, of course. Lastly, one must keep experimenting, learning, redesigning, and evolving. Despite the disparities and the divide in the Indian education system, which are now more pronounced due to the pandemic, we need to pave a way and devise means to bridge the gaps by being flexible with methods, approaches, and models, and find a way to bring out the best out of the situation and make a lasting impact. With this, dear participants, I hope you enjoyed the session and are taking back crucial insights from the panel.